extra yarn. On a cold afternoon, in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabel found a box filled with yarn of every colour. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabel was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars, too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabel and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabel. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate, and his dog, and for herself, and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabel's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabel, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabel said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could. And she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabel still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mum and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Lewis. She made sweaters for everyone. Except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters, or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabel still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for other animals too. Soon, people thought, soon Annabel will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabel made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabel's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabel. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabel, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's moustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabel shook her head. No thanks.
10 million, shouted the Archduke. Take it or leave it.
Leave it, said Annabel. I won't sell the yarn. And she didn't. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabel's house. And they stole the box and took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favourite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted its lid and he looked inside. His moustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again. But it turned out she was.
That was a fun story, wasn't it, that you just listened to? Extra yarn. Do you think that story was fiction? Was it made up? Or was it non-fiction? Was it something that really could happen, that maybe had facts in the story? Right, it was a fiction story. Could that really happen? Could somebody really have a magic box that never runs out of yarn? Probably not. That makes it fiction. It's a fun story to listen to and read. What did you think about Annabel? She started by making a sweater for herself. And then who did she make sweaters for? Right? Her friends. Even her friend that made fun of her at first, right? Yeah. She was very generous. That means she's willing to give what she has to others. She made sweaters for her friends. She made sweaters for her classmates and her teachers and her neighbors. And when everybody she knew had a sweater or a hat, she started making sweaters for things, even things that wouldn't wear sweaters, like trees and bushes and mailboxes and houses. But it said because Annabel did that, her dreary little cold town started to look pretty special, didn't it? All because of Annabel and that magic box full of yarn. Now, what happens when the Archduke came? What did he offer Annabel? Right, $1 million for the magic box of yarn. And then what did she say? She said, nope. Then what did he offer? $2 million. And what did Annabel say? No, thanks. And then he offered $10 million. Did Annabel take it? Nope. She enjoyed having her box of yarn and making things for others. So the Archduke did what? Right, he stole the magic box of yarn. But was the box magic for him? Nope. He wanted it just for himself because he loved clothes. But the box wasn't magic. And the box found its way back to Annabelle and was filled with yarn again. What a fun story. It's fun to pretend, isn't it? And it's also a good lesson about sharing what we have with others, especially when we have more than enough. You're all very generous. You're always willing to share. I'm glad and I'm proud of you. Keep that up. But you also heard in our story a word that starts with Y. Yarn. Right. So let's do some activities with some yarn. All right. See you in a few.